Ready to get started? All right, welcome everybody. Good morning. So welcome to the first session of the second day of Q Group. I'm going to be speaking about working with the manufacturing module. So I assume most of you are already working with our manufacturing module. Are there any people that are kind of looking at it, thinking about manufacturing? Okay, so a couple of you out there. Okay. So a lot of this session is going to focus on existing users, some functionality that existing users might be interested in. But I think you guys look at a picture of what manufacturing can do for you. So my name is Amy Sonntag. I am the Midwest rep for Component Control. I'm based out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and cover the Midwest doing ambassador visits. As many of you know, you guys have had those, doing implementations, training, and all of the above. And I specialize in the manufacturing module. I was actually a customer before I worked for Component Control, and I implemented the manufacturing module at that company and came on here, and now I get to work with these wonderful gentlemen. So also on the panel today, we've got Carlo Del Frate. He's our Vice President of Development. He is the brawn behind the manufacturing module, as many of you know. We've got Ryan Reale Vasquez. He is also a trainer for manufacturing, specializing in this area. We've got TJ Petrucci, who's our tech support supervisor. Many of you, I'm sure, if you've had any problems or technical difficulties, have talked to TJ. He's amazing at resolving any issues you might be running into, as well as John Asmus. He's also on our tech support team, and you may get him as well when you're calling, asking about manufacturing. So when we started talking about what we wanted to talk about at Q Group this year for manufacturing module, we started thinking about, what do we want to address here? What do we want to talk about this year? Of course, we always want to talk about new development, what's new in the module that you guys can take advantage of and that you can use. And Carlo's going to talk about that towards the end of the presentation. I'll let him take all the credit for some very exciting changes that I know will probably get a round of applause here. So when that happens, you can feel free. But what we wanted to do is address some commonly asked manufacturing questions. So as I'm training and as we've got our guys on tech support, there are certain questions that come up pretty commonly as you guys are getting going with manufacturing, or just as you run into maybe some uncommon situations as you're processing those orders. So we wanted to address some of those questions today. So some of you may know some of this information, but some of you it may be helpful for you. So we'll go through some FAQs. We're also going to talk about how other modules interact with manufacturing. So as you know, manufacturing is its own module, but it really does not stand alone. We have all of our peripheral modules that will come into play and can really help you guys be more productive as you're doing your work and working through those manufacturing orders. And then, of course, we'll talk about some new enhancements. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go through some of those manufacturing frequently asked questions. For those of you that are new to the manufacturing module, this is sort of just a really high-level example of what the manufacturing module does as opposed to the work order module, which many of you also use. So like I said, a lot of what happens with manufacturing a lot of times is people start out using, you guys are doing parts brokering, and maybe you guys are maybe you're doing some shop control and you get into doing some PMA or DER parts, right? So you're familiar with shop control, and then you kind of move over to the manufacturing side. That happens sometimes, not always. Sometimes you start right off with our manufacturing module. But the difference between manufacturing and shop control is in manufacturing, we start out with nothing, and we're going to create something, right? We're going to create a stock line at the end of the day. So what manufacturing will do is it takes your labor cost, your material cost, any outside process cost, any charges that might occur in the manufacturing of that end item, and it rolls all of that cost essentially up into the end item assembly. And once we create that end item assembly, we commonly call that building the end item assembly. It creates a stock line in Quantum. And of course, you've got that stock line in Quantum, and you can do whatever you want with that stock line. You can stock it in your inventory. You can put it on a sales order and sell that part. You can put it on a work order. But that's what manufacturing does, taking nothing and making a stock line in your system, right? A very, very high-level overview of what that does. So here are some commonly asked questions that we get in tech support and when I'm on-site training. One of the first questions that comes up often is, at the end of the day, when we're ready to roll all of that cost up into the end item assembly, there are a couple options. There's an option that's called build, and there's an option that's called receive finished parts. Those of you that started out with manufacturing years ago only had that build option, right? That was the first option that we had to be able to create that stock line in the system. And then a couple of years later, we introduced the receive finished parts item. So maybe if you've been using manufacturing for quite some time, you're still using this build option, and maybe you're not familiar with the receive finished parts option, or vice versa. So we want to talk a little bit about what the difference is between those two. So we've got our build option, and I'm going to jump into Quantum here in just a moment, or some screenshots. And building is really a simple process that will roll all of your costs up and create a stock line. It's really, there are 2 clicks that you need to do to create that stock line. And really what Quantum will do is you'll say global, build. It just sort of gives you a confirmation here. Do you want to build your assembly? What quantity do you want to build? And that's about it. Your quantities will change at the top of your MO header here in production management. You'll see your quantity can build go from the quantity that you're building to quantity built. And that's really about it. So it's very simple, very easy process, right? But what we found was that sometimes customers are looking for a little bit more functionality behind creating that stock line, right? Typically, when we create a stock line in the system, maybe we're receiving off of a purchase order, maybe we're receiving back from a repair order. So there are some other things that we may want to do when we create that stock line. So what we did is we developed another option under the global menu that's called receive finished parts. And what receive finished parts will do is it will follow Quantum's quick receiving process when you create that stock line. Following that quick receiving process gives you guys a lot more functionality and a lot more options when you create that stock line in the system. Oops, wrong button. So of course you guys are all familiar with Quantum's quick receiving screen, I'm sure. So what you have is you have options now. Instead of just doing the build and Quantum saying it doesn't even say congratulations, you've built a stock line. It just changes quantities. Now you've got some options here. You get your quantity to receive, of course, but you can give it a location. You can give it a warehouse. Say where you're stocking it. You can add some notes in if you want to add some notes in here. Expiration date, traceability information, just a lot more data that you can enter in now at this point. The other thing that receive finished parts will do for you is will also allow you to print out a part label. So at this point, this is probably a really good point in the process to generate that label, put it on your completed part, and go ahead and stock it or ship it out. Any other functionality in the receive finished parts, Carlo, or anybody here that I didn't mention?
We're going to talk about the new.
We are going to talk about the enhancements.
But
we're saving the best for last. Okay. So another question that comes up is, you guys create those templates in the background for your manufacturing orders, and you're going about processing those orders, and occasionally you may need to change a bill of material quantity on an existing manufacturing order. So this is something that you can do outside of the template. It doesn't affect the template that you've previously created at all. It only affects this specific manufacturing order when you make a change to the bill of material item. When you go into the bill of material item, the main thing that you need to know when you're changing a quantity here is that it's changing the quantity needed for the manufacturing order. It doesn't affect the quantity per assembly. So typically when we create a manufacturing template, we may say that we have 1 bushing per end item assembly, and then of course Quantum will extend that out over over the quantity that you're going to build, right? So in this case, when we change the quantity on the bill of material item, it affects the entire manufacturing order, and that quantity per assembly no longer applies. And the simple way to do that is to check the manually manage quantity needed box right here. It's going to automatically also select the do not validate quantity issue box. So once you select that, you'll see that you no longer have the option to change the quantity per assembly, and now you can enter in your new quantity needed and you can go ahead and proceed. So Quantum is going to give you a message and remind you of that and make you accept through that screen, but you'll be able to change that. So we see this happen pretty often for materials such as maybe paint, adhesive, things like this that, there's not necessarily a set amount that you're going to use each time, and you may need to come in and make some quantity adjustments. Okay. Probably the most common question that we get through support is, why can't I build my final assembly, right? So you guys have probably all come across this if you're manufacturing users, where you go to build your assembly, whichever method you decide to use, and you can't build it, and you need to figure out why. So what we'll typically do in support, and also what I'll do when I'm out training you guys, is I'll give you a checklist. You've got this checklist of several reasons why Quantum is going to prevent you from creating that final assembly in the system. So what you'll first do is you'll check that quantity can build on the production management header. So I'm going to pull up an example here in Quantum, because I have an example that we can use. Okay, so here's our main manufacturing order, and I'm going to jump over to production management. And the first thing I'm going to look at when I'm ready to build my end item assembly is I'm going to look at my quantity can build. And right now my quantity can build is 0, and my total quantity required is 2. So that signals me right away, even before I hit global and try to build my final assembly, that something's not right. There's something that's not complete in my manufacturing order. And this is really a benefit of Quantum's manufacturing module, is it's going to force you into completing certain processes before you can create your stock line. It's really great so you don't accidentally build your stock line with a lower cost than you intended and have to make some adjustments after the fact. So it's really sort of a check and balance. So my quantity can build here is 0. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to start going through my checklist before I build my final assembly. So I'm going to jump back over to the PowerPoint slide. So the first thing I think about is all my labor recorded, right? I mean, this isn't required. Quantum's not going to make sure that you have any certain set quantity of labor in the manufacturing order. But as a best practice, we always want to make sure all of our labor is recorded, all of our labor is correct, because that's going to play into the cost of our end item assembly, right? So then I start going through my checklist. Are all required inspections complete? If you have a task that's flagged as inspection required, that inspection has to be complete, and the quantity of items that you pass through inspection needs to have come through in order to build your assembly. Okay. Another thing that you will want to check is, are all of your outside processes complete and are they all received? So if you have a manufacturing order task on the manufacturing order flagged as an outside process, Quantum's going to make sure that you've sent that out for an outside process and that you've brought it back in, and that those inspections are complete from that outside process. So that's another one that you'll notice quite often. Okay. And then, of course, is all material issued. So all of the material requirements on your bill of materials need to have those the material reserved and issued to the manufacturing order. If it's not, you're not going to be allowed to build it. And lastly, if you have subassemblies attached to your manufacturing order, are all those subassemblies built and issued to the next level, the next higher level component? Okay. So if any of you are interested in having my little checklist, feel free to get in touch with me afterwards, because I'll sure send that over to you. I think a lot of people have found it really useful as they're going through the manufacturing process. So I'm going to jump back over to my manufacturing order here, and as I think through my process, I can see that I do have an inspection required here. So I want to check and see if that inspection is complete. And here's an issue where I can see that my inspection hasn't been completed. So I know that that's something that I'll need to have to do in order to build my final assembly, right? I can also see over in production management that I have a bill of material item that has not been issued. So I've got a couple separate issues happening with this one. When I go ahead and take care of those things, then I'll be able to build my end item assembly. Okay. Any other comments from the support group on building? Any issues you guys see?
I just was going to say, you might want to point out that we have filters on the bill of materials so that you can see what's completed and what's not. You might want to.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what Carlos said is that we do have filters on the bill of material as well. If you're trying to, maybe you've got a very long bill of materials. I mean, it's probably not typical that you only have 2 parts on a bill of material. There is a box right here that says show unfilled materials, and that's going to quickly bring to your attention what items you need to take care of. Okay. And the last common question is, what's the proper process for closing a manufacturing order? And usually sometimes we get this question in different forms, and usually it comes up on the accounting side of things. There's a step that gets missed. The proper process for closing a manufacturing order is actually a 3-step process. So when we close the manufacturing order, we first need to do the build, okay? Build or receive finished parts. We need to release the item, so whether we release it back to stock or we release it to a linked sales order. And then we need to reconcile the manufacturing order. So I'll go through this step with you and kind of show you what each step does. But the reconcile part is the most commonly missed step, and it may even be a step that some of you are missing out there. You are able to change the status on the manufacturing order to closed, and it can appear to be closed for all intensive purposes, but there's still some accounting functionality that hasn't happened yet if you haven't done the reconcile step with your manufacturing order. So I'm going to jump into a manufacturing order here. And I'll jump over into purchase management. So I'm ready to close this manufacturing order. I know I'm ready. I see my quantity can build as 1. I'm just going to be building 1 of this item. So I know that I'm ready to build. Everything's ready to go. All of my labor, everything's entered into my order. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into global, and for our purposes today, I'll go to build assembly. Quantum's going to confirm that I want to build my final assembly and confirm the quantity that I want to build. And what I'll see happen here is I'm going to see my quantity can build jump from 1 to 0, and my quantity built will jump from 0 to 1. So that's the first step. I've created the stock line in the system now. Now in Quantum, there is a stock line. It's actually going to be reserved to this manufacturing order. It's not available. It's in stock. It's not on your sales order if you have an associated sales order. It's just reserved to this manufacturing order. So step 2 will go in and we'll be going in and releasing those parts, right? So a lot of you probably are used to this piece as well. So I'm going to go into inspect assemblies. And you can see my stock line here that's been created. And you can see that it's reserved to the manufacturing order. So I've got some options here. I need to release it. I can either release it to stock. I can release it to a linked sales order if there is a linked sales order. Or if I select release all, what Quantum will do is it will automatically release any quantity to the linked sales orders, and any remaining quantity will go into stock. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and select release all. And you can see that now I have one that's been released to stock. So if I'm in production, maybe this, depending on how your workflow goes, maybe this is a step that your production does. Maybe it's a step that is an administrative step. But at this point, your final task may be closed out, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just close this status, make it complete. I thought I grabbed complete. Grab a closed status here. Well, what you'll be able to see is that once you close it out, looks like my task is closed here. So I can see that it's filtered it out. There we go. So I can see that all of my tasks are complete. Okay. So for all intents and purposes, this manufacturing order appears to be closed, right? However, what you can see is the disposition on the header here is still WIP. This means that there's still cost in WIP for this manufacturing order. Now, if you don't have the accounting module, this may not be a huge concern for you. But if you do have the manufacturing module, or I'm sorry, the accounting module, this will be a big concern for you because you've got a lot of costs here yet sitting in WIP. So this is typically an accounting function to come in and reconcile the manufacturing order. So the simple step, it's really a simple step. All we need to do is go into global and we'll go into reconcile manufacturing order. And it's going to remind you that it's going to close everything out, and you'll say, sure, go ahead and close everything out. Mark it as a closed status. And what you'll see happen is that cost will move from WIP to cost of goods. Okay? Carly, do you want to add anything to that accounting piece?
Yeah, I just want to point out the disposition code there. When it goes to cost of goods, really what that means is, excuse me, it's in a cost of goods disposition, which means if you get any late costing on there, that cost will go to cost of goods. It doesn't mean that what was currently in WIP went to cost of goods. That went to finished goods through the build process. When you receive finished parts, the cost from the MO will go into the final cost of the stock lines, but once it's put into a closed COG, cost of goods disposition, any new cost will then go straight to cost of goods because there's no inventory to relieve that cost from WIP at that point. So generally you don't want to get any more cost on there at this point, but it does happen.
Good question. So if you get additional cost after the fact, it goes to cost of sales, would you just do an inventory adjustment to move it back?
You could. Sometimes you've already invoiced the parts and they're gone. So, yeah. So it's, yes, you could do that. Yeah.
So it's still sitting on our shelf. Just doing it.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about how Quantum interacts with other, how manufacturing interacts with other Quantum modules. Okay. So the first way that Quantum can interact with manufacturing and other modules is through purchase management. So in purchase management, we've got some options here to view, make, or buy parts. So many of you, when you create your part master, you may skip over this option, but there's a selection. Jump over here. We have an option on the part master where we can mark a procurement as make or buy. So I commonly see this used, and it pulls into purchase management, if you're familiar with our purchase management module, where you'll be able to sort your make and buy parts and see what parts maybe you need to make and manufacture. You can actually cut manufacturing orders right from purchase management, and what parts maybe are just your typical buy parts. So this is common for people doing procurement or people that may be cutting those manufacturing orders to sort their requirements that way. Another option that we can do in purchase management is that we can approve purchases and create purchase orders for bill of material items, right? So those bill of material items that show up as needs in your manufacturing order, bill of materials, and fall into that criteria that purchase management requires to show up in that needs window, will come into your purchase management as well. You can also purchase for planned or firmed orders with that release flag on the manufacturing order. So there's a filter in purchase management here where we can filter by only release manufacturing orders. So we can purchase for planned, or we can just purchase for manufacturing orders that we've released into the system and that we're actively going to be manufacturing. Okay. The other thing that we can do from purchase management is we can actually create a manufacturing order for a part right from purchase management. So rather than approving the purchase and moving it as a purchasing function, we can now create manufacturing orders from here. So the requirement will be that you have a template set up in the background for that master part number. It's going to look for that template, look for an active template to create that manufacturing order for. So I should have a part here. That we can look for. There we go. So here's a part that we manufacture. The procurement is make. It looks like we may have a manufacturing order for it already. Let's see if it'll let me create one. There we go. So when I hit create manufacturing order, it's going to look out to those manufacturing templates that we've already got set up in the background, allow me to select that template, and then automatically roll me into creating that manufacturing order. So as I'm rolled into creating this manufacturing order, that need will drop off of purchase management. Okay. Outside process orders. This is something we may have talked about a little bit last year. We had some development last year where we had a requirement from a customer who wanted to be able to have visibility to all upcoming outside processes in manufacturing orders. And they wanted to be able to see what those were and when they were coming up, and then launch those outside processes from a browse window rather than from inside the manufacturing order. They had a purchasing department that was responsible for launching those, and they felt like that would be a better, more easier place for the customer to go to see those. So under manufacturing orders, we have a browse that's called Search Upcoming OSP. We've just got a couple search options. We can search by part number or manufacturing order, but if I just say OK, what I see is all of the outside process requirements that are coming up for all of my manufacturing orders that are in progress. So I can see the part number, the description, the MO number, and then also the due date. The due date on that task. And that's really critical because that will help your purchasing department or the people that are maybe using this browse to know when they need to launch those orders. So what they can simply do is they can hit send for OSP, and it will launch that repair order and roll you into creating that repair order process without having to go into the manufacturing order, find the task, cut the RO from there. Okay.
Maybe you might want to just show how to search through existing OSP once you get the order.
Okay, right. So what Carla was mentioning is once we've cut all of our repair orders, there's also a search option for searching all of the open OSPs. So we've got search upcoming, and then we've got the search the OSP orders. So searching the OSP orders will allow us to search any OSPs that have been attached to manufacturing orders, whether they're open or closed or both. So I selected open. So here are all of my open OSPs for manufacturing orders in my company. Okay. Event Manager. You guys have heard a lot about Event Manager, I'm sure, over the last couple of days. But an Event Manager has some great capabilities with manufacturing orders as well, and we're always coming out with new standard scripts that you guys can use. There's always something new when I go in there, and it's really great. We have a couple of manufacturing-specific alerts. Manufacturing Sales Ready Alert, I believe, is new this year. That applies to manufacturing orders. What this will do is if you've got a manufacturing order attached to a sales order, as soon as that manufacturing order is released to the sales order, so it's built and we've done that release functionality, Event Manager is going to kick off a notification to the person that you specify, maybe a salesperson, that that manufactured item has been complete. And so then the next action can be taken. Maybe it goes to a shipping department, maybe it goes to a salesperson, but that next action can be taken and your customer can get that part more quickly. And then there's also a manufacturer status alert as well. This is an example of the manufacturer sales ready event. You can just see, it's just another event that you'll set up, you'll see, and then this is what that will look like as it comes across. Of course, if you guys need some customization, we can always assist with that as well. And that MO status alert. So the MO status alert sends alerts based on the change in a status in the manufacturing order. So there are so many things that you guys can use this for. It's not just to tell you that a status has changed. What it really is used for is to tell someone to take action on that manufacturing order. Maybe it's the next person in the next work center that needs to do some work. Maybe it's a salesperson. Or maybe there's a status alert that alerts accounting that the manufacturing order has been complete and they need to go in and now they need to reconcile that manufacturing order. So this is something that we've set up before so that accounting knows that they need to go out and do that so we don't miss that step of moving that cost from WIP over to cost of goods sold. We also have some manufacturing alerts that sort of go incognito in an Event Manager if you're looking for them, because they're sort of hidden under the work order alerts. So as many of you know, there's a lot of similarities between work order and manufacturing order. And what we can do is we can configure many, if not all, of the work order alerts to work with manufacturing by simply using a type code of MFG, and now all of those work order alerts can be used for manufacturing. So a couple examples are a new work order becomes a new manufacturing order alert, right? So it sends the alert when the new manufacturing order is created. Maybe we need to alert a salesperson that that manufacturing order has been started for their linked sales order so they can notify their customer. Maybe we want to notify management that a manufacturing order has been created. Maybe we'll want to notify purchasing so they know that they need to go out and do their procurement. But that's what that alert can be used for. We can also use the PO received for work order alert for a PO received for manufacturing order. So employees can proactively look for parts that have been received. So you'll see in any of these alerts that are work order alerts, you just need to change the work order type to manufacturing. Pretty simple. An MO task status change. So this is a lot like the MO status change, but it looks at those tasks. So you can notify employees or customers of task status changes. And then we've got a couple of alerts as well this year, actual cost and hours warnings. So again, use that code, manufacturing code on those work order events. But what this alert's going to ask you for is it's going to ask you for a threshold. And you'll set a threshold, and this will be what kicks off the notification. So, for example, with this alert, I may have a actual hours warning set up for my manufacturing order. So maybe I do some standard cost manufacturing orders, and I expect this manufacturing order to always take 10 hours, right? So what I can do is I can set a threshold on my alert of 110, and so at 110% of 10 hours is when this alert is going to be kicked off. So when I go over 11 hours on that manufacturing order, I want to know as management, because I know that my cost on that order is going to be more than I expect it to, right? So I want to know what's going on with that order. Why is there a delay in the process? What's taking so long? So I can take action right away. So we've got these warnings for hours and for cost as well. Okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlo for new enhancements. Look, and you even get an applause from next door. Yeah. This is amazing.
Something science going on there, huh? Okay. Yeah, my name's Carlo Del Frate. I've been with the company now for about 14 years. The manufacturing system is kind of one of my babies, I guess you can call it. There's a couple new features that I wanted to highlight here. And this one in particular was brought to our attention from this group and from some of our other customers. It came up in several of the roundtables that we've had. So I'm happy that we're at the point now where we can tell you that it's done. So the situation we had was when you're building, when you're finishing your manufacturing orders, you may have 100 units that you're going to process. But your cost is constantly rolling up, right? So you've got labor costs, you've got part costs. And what was happening is somebody would come and say, okay, you've got to expedite 2 pieces now. But you might have labor costs on all 100, they're all being processed, but you take 2 out of the mix and you move them forward because your customer needs them right away. But you've got all this cost that's rolling up. And so what was happening in the actual cost setting. Now in standard cost, this wasn't really a problem because you could predefine what your standard cost was, and it just always brings it in at the standard cost. But a lot of our customers like to use actual cost because it truly takes all the cost in the job and puts it on the finished units, and that's more accurate as far as how much did we actually spend on this project. In this scenario, what was happening is if it was an actual cost manufacturing order, all of your costs would roll up into the first set of units that were received from that order. Now what would happen is if you did have labor and you did have parts cost onto more than just those two parts, then you're getting really high cost on those first two items that were brought into inventory, which makes it difficult to figure out margins and commissions and things like that. And so we were asked for a solution to this. So, on the flip side of this, what was kind of difficult is for the system didn't really know how much of your cost was rolled up into these items, so it's hard for us to say, maybe they just started processing 2 units and that's all they've been doing and all that cost is really just for those 2 units, or maybe it's for all 100. We didn't always have a good way to know that, so we didn't really have anything automated to deal with that. So as you can see, the scenario could go either way. So what we've decided to do, and this is available now, this is actually available in 10.4, which is a production version of Quantum. So, if this is a challenge for you today, you can actually get this anytime you want. But what we've got here is on the receiving finished parts screen that we were talking about earlier, we have now a cost tab. There we go. So there's a cost tab. And you're going to see here, you can see how much will be applied when you're going to receive the parts. And you can see how much is currently in WIP. And this is also, by the way, this is controlled by security, so not just anybody can go in here and start messing around with the numbers. But if you need to, when you're receiving finished parts, you can actually assign cost here. So whatever doesn't get assigned from the total of WIP will stay in WIP, and the next time you go to receive, you'll have another opportunity to say how much you want to assign in terms of cost. Now you can see that the cost does fall into these different categories, so you're gonna basically be assigning cost out of these different buckets, and that's how it breaks down through WIP. And so you'll be able to tailor what you need to do as far as cost assignments. So this is a pretty major enhancement, and it was quite a bit of development to get all this to fly. So I hope everybody out there will be able to use this. There are a couple things to consider here. One is that if you always receive all your parts at the same time, and you're going to if you're running 10 parts and you finish 10 parts, then you don't even need to worry about this. This will all work fine. The other side of this, however, is if you're doing cost assignments and you've only allocated a partial amount out of WIP, and then you've got no more parts to receive, and you close the manufacturing order, then that cost is going to go to cost of goods because it hasn't been assigned. So that's kind of just the flip side of this. But I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. So, if you're going to be in here, just make sure that you do assign all your costs if you still have costs left over. All right, so we're starting to run short here, but I do want to talk about this. Labor collection. This is a big deal for us. We had a new customer going live on our software, and they liked Quantum, but the one thing that they really couldn't live without was a touch screen for labor collection. So we worked with them to develop something along the lines of what they were using. We kind of put our own spin on it, but ultimately I think we ended up with a really nice product here. This also works for aircraft maintenance and MRO, but I just want to make sure we bring it up for manufacturing because it was intended to work with manufacturing as well. What we have here is the employee ID. So this can be done with a mouse, but it's also, you'll notice here, there's a touch mode setting on here, so it'll kind of expand it so that you don't fat finger the selections. But once you put in your ID, you can scan it in with a barcode or you can type it in. Once you do this, there's a lot of features here available to you for labor collection. You can ask it to load the last labor batch you were on. So if I'm coming back from lunch and I was clocked into 3 different tasks on 3 different manufacturing orders, you say, load up my last task, and it'll load it up for you. And say, go ahead and clock me on, submit it. So I'll be clocked onto that batch instantly. So it's very fast. You can look at your historical activity, and then you can clock onto it. So it's really good for if you're just coming back the next day or coming back from lunch, you want to reload everything you've been working on. Over here is a partial search on the work order number. So if you don't know, if you're not sure yet which work order you're going to work on, or I should say if you know which work order you're going to work on, you can start typing it in here, and it'll sort of do a partial completion. It'll start bringing down tasks from the different work orders that you're starting to key in. And you can actually grab those. This is all touch mode, so you can grab them and pull them over here. You can also choose from your list of activity, of past activity. So if you've been working on some projects off and on, all of that's going to show up down here. And if you just need to clear it out, that'll wipe it out. But at 12:35 today, there's a shop control demonstration where I think I believe Ryan Corbin is going to demo this on the shop control side. So I think you'll get to see it live. So I definitely recommend that if you've got the time to see that presentation. But I would definitely go back and play with this because I think a lot of people are going to get some use out of it. All right. Time's up, but I just want to say one last thing real quick here. If any of you are working with tools, we have a new interface on the same utility, the generic BC application, that lets you check tools in and out and transfer tools between technicians. It's also integrated with time and attendance, so if I've got tools checked out and I'm about to clock out for the day, I'm happy because I'm leaving work. It can actually stop you and say, "Hey, no, you've got these tools checked out," and it'll tell you which ones are checked out, and then you have an option to have a supervisor override it and put in his password and let you go, or he may tell you to go back and find your tools. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I think some of you would take benefit from. Kind of came more from the work. Aircraft maintenance side, but I know all of you use tools, so hopefully you get something out of that. Okay, I think that pretty much wraps it up. If we have any questions...
We've got about 2 to 3 minutes to take some questions.
Okay, cool.
With regard to touch, are they on 10.5?
The touch screen, we have it on 10.4, so you have it now if you're on our latest version. Any other questions? I'm sorry. It is in 10.4. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Also, just wanted to add as well real quick that we do have a manufacturing roundtable this afternoon that Carlo and I and a couple of us will be at. So if you guys have additional questions or you want to have some additional discussion, please come to that roundtable as well.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. So yeah, if you do have any more, please come to the roundtable. And thank you for coming out. I know it's the first morning, the early morning shift here, but I appreciate you coming by.